This film is based on deception, betrayal, and shifting allegiances within a spy agency. The film opens with George Woodhouse, a seasoned and meticulous intelligence officer renowned for his ability to detect deception. George is summoned by his superior, Meacham, for an urgent meeting. In their conversation, Meacham explains that a dangerous piece of software named Severus has gone missing. Severus is capable of disabling nuclear systems globally. The leak could result in catastrophic geopolitical consequences. Meacham stresses the critical nature of the situation, warning George that they must identify the mole within a week or risk mass destruction. Meacham hands George a list of 5 suspects, all of whom had access to Severus. The suspects are Catherine Woodhouse, George's wife and a respected intelligence officer; Clarissa Dubose, a satellite imaging specialist; Freddie Smalls, a mid-level analyst who was recently passed over for a promotion; Colonel James Stokes, a rising operative in the field; and Dr. Zoe Vaughn, the department psychiatrist. After the meeting, George returns home and speaks with Catherine. Their conversation is tense. George attempts to gauge whether Catherine knows anything about the leak, but she appears calm and insists she has nothing to hide. Despite her composed demeanor, George remains unconvinced and begins his independent investigation. He hosts a dinner party with all 5 suspects present. Under the guise of camaraderie, George introduces a psychological game designed to lower inhibitions. George introduces a game where each participant will have to take a resolution for the one sitting at their right. Zoe asks James to be less selfish and give others' interest a priority. James tells her that in their field of work, this is how things go. When it comes to James, he asks Clarissa to ask herself why she always runs after older men, to which she replies that old men have more experience in life, and on the other hand, young people are only fond of video games. When it is Clarissa's turn, she takes a resolution for Freddie and asks her not to sleep with his other mistress. Freddie vehemently denies the accusation and claims that she is sick and traumatized as her parents left her during her childhood. But George exposes the truth about Freddie's affair and reveals that he knows about the hotels where he goes to meet his lover. Tensions rise. An enraged Clarissa stabs Freddie with a kitchen knife in a fit of rage. He survives, but the emotional impact of the evening marks a turning point in the investigation. Later that night, George and Catherine lie in bed. They reaffirm their loyalty to each other, promising to navigate the investigation together, regardless of what it might uncover. The next morning, George finds a movie ticket that doesn't match Catherine's claimed schedule. When he confronts her, she denies having seen that movie. George quietly notes the inconsistency, but does not press further. On the other hand, Meacham is at his house drinking when he suddenly falls to the ground and convulses to death. This is witnessed by his mistress who was with him. Soon after, George receives news that Meacham has died under mysterious circumstances while drinking at home. Although officially labeled as an accident, George suspects foul play. Freddie informs George of Meacham's death, prompting George to intensify his investigation. He covertly accesses Catherine's work computer and discovers an encrypted message pointing to a meeting in Zurich, along with unknown geographic coordinates. To investigate discreetly, George arranges a fishing trip with James, who, during their discussion, reveals that Catherine has a hidden offshore account containing £7 million. This revelation shocks George and plants further seeds of doubt. George then visits Clarissa and proposes a deal. If she agrees to assist him, he will keep her infidelity a secret from Freddie. Clarissa is shocked to know that George knows about her affairs and has no other choice but to agree to his proposal. Here it is clear to us that Clarissa loves Freddie and wants to save their relationship. Using her satellite access credentials, Clarissa and George redirect a surveillance satellite toward the Zurich coordinates. The imagery reveals that Catherine has a clandestine meeting with Russian military officer Andrei Kulikov. Freddie comes to know about this and reports this finding to Zoe, who quietly requests a secret favor. Shortly after, it's discovered that General Pavlichuk, Kulikov's superior and a high-priority surveillance target, has gone missing. His disappearance coincides exactly with the satellite redirection ordered by George, suggesting that their decision inadvertently allowed Pavlichuk to evade surveillance. Compounding to the crisis, the Severus software is now confirmed missing from the agency's secure vault. Realizing the scale of his error, George is consumed with guilt. Clarissa confides in Freddie about her role in redirecting the satellite. Freddie, in turn, informs Catherine and asks her to protect George. That evening, George and Catherine share a candid conversation and decide to find the real traitor together. To mitigate the damage and protect George's reputation, Catherine contacts her subordinates and coordinates a drone strike that successfully eliminates Pavlichuk. The agency regains a measure of control, but the internal mole remains unidentified. George prepares a polygraph analysis session, calling in Clarissa, Freddie, James, and Zoe. He meticulously reviews each individual's responses. Though the results give him a strong suspicion about the culprit, George withholds his findings and instead organizes another dinner party at his home. At the second dinner, Catherine places a handgun on the table as a symbol of transparency and stakes. During the meal, George reveals his findings in full. He accuses James of stealing Severus and passing it to Pavlichuk, thereby enabling a potentially catastrophic nuclear incident. The evidence is overwhelming, and James does not deny the charges. George continues, disclosing that Zoe had asked Freddie for a favor to assist Pavlichuk's escape because she anticipated that Catherine would resort to extreme measures like a drone strike to prevent the use of Severus. Zoe confirms this, explaining that while her actions were unauthorized, her intention was to preserve life by avoiding a military response. The final twist unfolds as George announces that the offshore bank account in Catherine's name, which held the £7 million, was in fact set up by James to frame her. The payment came from Pavlichuk as compensation for Severus. George then reveals that James did not act alone. He had the backing of Arthur Stieglitz, the agency's director and Catherine's superior. Their objective was to discredit George and Catherine and eventually remove them as threats to Stieglitz's position. Upon exposure, James drops his facade and lunges for the gun on the table. He fires at George, but the gun is loaded with blanks. In response, Catherine retrieves her weapon and shoots James in the head, ending the standoff instantly. In the aftermath, Stieglitz is stripped of his title and faces an internal inquiry. The narrative closes on a quiet scene with George and Catherine sitting together, acknowledging the personal cost of their work but resolute in their shared commitment to the truth. With Stieglitz gone and the mole eliminated, the agency begins to rebuild. Black Bag stands out as a tense and methodical spy thriller, centered not on high-octane action, but on cerebral conflict, psychological tension, and moral ambiguity. Each scene builds on the previous in logical sequence, with consistent characterization and a narrative rooted in realism. The performances by Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett lend gravity to the complex emotional undercurrents, while director Steven Soderbergh's direction maintains a measured, suspenseful tone throughout.